Alrighty, we got the round one of Nephilim. My voice is a little dead, but that's okay. And I'm just gonna talk about various stuff from the round, and hopefully it'll be interesting. So the rules were levels 1, 3, 5, 7, and 9, same plus wall combo. Importantly, no same wall. Obviously, same wall doesn't come up that frequently, given that there's no... Oh, we'll finish the stipulations. Must use one card from each level, no rares, no A9 corners. So given that there's only one card there, the level 9, that can, without being a rare, have an A, only one card is affected by the no same wall impact. Though it does have some effect on, other cards that pair up with the 9, right? Let's say we imagined an A862 or something. If there was an opposite 8-8 corner, the A862 can capture that 8-8 corner both ways, one way with same wall, one way with overpowering and plus wall. However, with this, it can only recapture that corner one of the two ways. So it affects the A8 corners captures, but that also affects the cards you might choose to pair with it. So some thoughts I wrote out before the games. No same wall weakens A's in general. Often with A9 corners excluded, A8s reign supreme. Here there is a good reason to think it will be 9-9s that are top dog, because normally it becomes either A8s or 9-9s are the best cards available, and without same wall, I would assume 9-9s would dominate. The strongest corners available per level. Level 1, you have 5 4s. Level 3, you have 7 5s or 6 6s. Level 4, you have 7 7s. You also have 7 6 6 type stuff, but 7 7 is the most powerful corner. Level 7, you have 8 8s. There's also lots of lesser stuff, but just, 8 8s is the most powerful corner. And at level 9, you have 8 8s or 9 9s. In split level sets like this, it's often risky to use your high level card early, thus finding ways to use the low levels effectively is of huge importance. Specifically, I think corners are valuable because it's the way lower levels can best kind of approximate higher levels or inconvenience higher levels. A card like an A854 might be able to only take a 6-6 corner one way. It might have 0 ways. It might have both ways if it's in a certain corner, but in any of the other corners besides the one the A854 is specifically aimed at, it can only be captured 1 or 0 ways by the A854, more commonly 1, and that means it is a card that can pose difficulty to the high-level card the opponent's likely to hold for late. So your level 3 can be something that makes it harder for them to keep their high level as a sweeper into the endgame. First turn is likely to have a board full of cards that their high level can overpower. We want to be playing these low level corners, I think, because it tries to avoid that situation on second turn. But I did expect this to be a first turn favorite set. Sorry about my voice. More specific thoughts. I think all starter types, so this I wrote as the round was going. I think all starter types are viable in this set. The key starter plan should be to use the level 1 or perhaps the level 3 first, though using the level 5 I think is also possible. If drawn to use a high level for safety early, here's what I'd think about. That high level will have uses later. If it's safe now, then it will either be safe or have lots of overpowers later. But your low level is just going to suck in your hand later, right? It's going to require a lot of setup work to be able to compete with higher level cards later. So it's less costly to use the low level now usually and hold on to the high level. I would add that for second turn, you're not going to have to use one card in your hand. So it might make sense to jump to a higher level first, a 3, a 5, maybe a 7, because that one level maybe will never actually have to be played. 8199 is a tremendously powerful card and seems like the obvious choice. It's a level 9 card that is clearly level 10 power, and in a set when A's are weakened, so it is even stronger than it would look relatively. A 9971 is an alternative, and one that was seen fairly frequently. I think 9917 as well, but same thing. 3 directional cards make good endgame sweepers, right? If we think about that 6-6 corner scenario, it is difficult for an A854 to deal with that 6-6 in 3 of the 4 corners. An 8199 has double captures in 2 of the 4 corners rather than only 1, and has at least 1 capture against a 6-6 corner in every single corner. And I think that speaks to 3 directional cards being pretty useful when facing low levels, because they are so much more likely to be those endgame sweepers that can take all the cards you need, right? An A8-5-4 against a 6-6 in each of the four corners averages 1 capture. An 8-1-9-9 averages 1.5 captures. And that's a pretty big difference. I think big corners are good on the low-level cards, but not mandatory. We saw some very good players play really well with things like 8-5-7-4s, meaning not going for the corner, the 8-7-5-4, but going for them opposite each other. And side-to-side cards can be strong. The opponent can have a maximum of 1 A's or 2 9s in their hand. Thus, I'd rather cover 9s than A's, especially as A's are a bit weakened in general. So I would certainly rather have the plus walls in my hand directed towards A's, right? I'd rather have something like 3-4 than 3-3 or 4-4, because I think covering 9s is more likely than covering A's. Also, with such big level gaps, there's less likely to be the same numbers hanging around. So there's less likely to be an 8 facing down into an 8, and more likely for an 8 to face into a 7 or 9. Of course, there are 2 ways you can have a 1 gap, and only 1 way to have a 0 gap, meaning like 8s can only be 0 away from 8. So if you have a 4-4 and are looking to combo stuff and want to play off an 8, it has to be another 8. While 4-5 can play off a 9, but the other way could play off other things, right? There's more combinations of cards that 1 gaps can work off. So I think in general, given that 9s are more likely to be there than A's, you'd rather have 1 gaps on your card than have 0 gaps. They will almost certainly have at least 1 8. There are ways to construct hands that don't have 8s, but they're very likely to have an 8 and likely to have 2 to 3. So covering 8s is pretty valuable. The level 3 to 5 are likely to combine for 1 to 3 7s and 2 to 4 6s. Thus, I'd think 6s and 8s are the most common numbers overall. I didn't actually do a count after, I just sort of estimated based on what cards I thought were likely. But I think being able to beat 6s and 8s is really relevant. And those are the most important things. So 2 gaps might be considered really valuable here. What did I choose? This was the hand I put together. I was inspired by Midas, Aesla, and Phipps, who all went in a similar direction. They all used Titan, the 8199. 2 of them used the 7864, which I think plays well with it. Notably, it means it also plays well against opposing Titans. If their Titan lands for some reason in 2 or in 6, it has plus walls against both. It has one of the plus walls against Titan in 3. It just seemed a nice pairing and a nice opposite corners, such that if I hold on to those 2 cards for the end, I will have a lot of power in the end game in whatever direction I need it. So I think 8199 is the best card available. I think 4341, I considered 3431, which was Midas's plan, having a 1 to the left, something easily recapturable by Titan, and the 1 square Titan can't ever recapture. It has potential synergies. I thought it was a really effective starter. I liked it. I switched it to 4341. 3431 has better coverage of 8s. 4341 has better coverage of 9s, but also better coverage of 7s. I am intending to use the card immediately, though, so I think its coverage of 8s versus 9s is not that important. It's more important on second turn than first, because I'm more likely to hold on to it for a while, but not that important. So the other thing I was thinking was with the 4s up and down, it sets my 6-2-6-7 up to control 8s on the left side of the board, which is something I might have some difficulty controlling, given that my hand does have clearly more power facing to the left. And given that 7864 only covers one of the potential 8s. 7864, Aesla and Phipps both paired 8199 with this card. I like the pairing. 7864 is a really good card. 6267, I waffled between this and 6367, but I thought 6s are a little more common than 7s, and I liked the synergy of 6267 playing off 4341. 1574, I initially wanted 2663, but I noticed would then have 3 6s facing down. I thought that could be exploitable. You don't want to end up in a scenario where all your cards have the same out facing. It's too easy for them to set up. And so I switched to 1574, which, as we'll see, I think is a pretty good card here. Weaknesses, I don't cover 8-8 corners in 3 at all. I have ways to set up. If I get to go first, I can drop 4, 3, 4, 1, and 5. However, what's the least likely square for them to have an 8-8 corner? It's definitely 3, because 8199 is so likely the building block of their hand, and they're not going to have 2 huge corners for 3. so I thought this is less likely than usual. A counterpoint is the second most common card after 8199 is 9971, and that could very easily be paired with an 88 corner in Titan's Corner. So maybe this was not as convincing as I thought. Did I get to play the hand? No, I didn't. Unless my game is played the day I'm recording this, my game's not going to be completed. But Delial did end up using... I was talking to him about hands and he hadn't built a hand yet, so he decided to use mine. He used a variant where he played 6-3-6-7 instead of 6-2-6-7, and he did prefer the 3-4-3-1 that Metis chose to the 4-3-4-1 I was intending to go with. Oh, one other synergy I forgot to say is 6-2-6-7, this is in the write-up here, also has occasional plus wall from Titan. The 9-1 can plus wall that too, and given that the 6-7-6 is pretty powerful outfacing numbers, that's often going to do damage the few times it does occur. Here's the brackets. It's a 3-section tournament. There will be 3 finalists. There have been, I think, 2 tournaments in history with this setup. Interestingly, Seto made the finals of both of them. In the first one, Seto came second, Meta came third, and Delial won. Delial has won every finals he's ever played. And in the second one, it was maybe Kaus, Kona, and Seto won? Not sure. Maybe Great Sephiroth was in there. It was the first Rhinoa finals, and Seto took it down. Here in our first section, we had predictions were made for this tournament, so we have some predictions. In the top half of the section, Chickney and Sir Smokes were considered the favorites, and in the bottom half was up Akiyama or Turds were considered the favorites. In the second section, Piggyman, Tezuka, and whoever you pick of Slash of Time or Metis to advance, with Saif also being a winner in that section, and there are certainly other good players in all these sections. Wavy was picked by one person to come second. Sadly, I should have grabbed this before the scores were shown, but you can see the scores so far. So you can see Smokes and Chickeny were both upset. You can see that Turds was upset. You can see that Metis did beat Slash of Time and played a hand that inspired the one I wanted to play. You can see that Wavy was upset. In the last section, a few interesting things happened. This is the Delial part of the bracket, so per usual, Delial is favorite, but tournaments have so many upsets, it is very difficult to say, yep, he's definitely in the finals. Using my ELO ratings, Delial has about a third chance to make the finals, which makes him, one of the most likely people by far to be in the finals, but it is to say the odds of that are still very low. And I calculated that before something else interesting happened, which is someone was kicked out of the bracket because they weren't going to play and were happy to say, I'm not going to play, you can remove me. And Seto was added in, which adds, a huge giant to the bracket. And also makes me really hopeful we get Seto versus Delial, because I do think that is the best rivalry in Triple Triad history. I was going through a bunch of them thinking about the ones that are really special. I think Seto versus Delial, myself was up versus Yojimbo, MC versus Nightwish is just funny. I think those were the 3 that really stood out to me. Delial versus Turds is really good. Delial versus Kono is really good. Kamikaze versus Sujiro is good. There were a few others. Was up versus MC. Was up versus Nightwish. Great Sephiroth versus Yojimbo and was up is also good. There's a lot of good ones, but for my money, and maybe it's because it was the big one when I appeared on the site, but Delial Seto is the match I think of as being like the great matchup of Triple Triad history. And so if it could happen one more time, that would be wonderful. It has happened 5 times. Delial has the advantage, but I would say Seto has a more consistent record against other players, and nothing could be more exciting. Really hoping that happens. So here's just some games from round 1 I thought were really interesting, really well played specifically. These are 4 of my favorite games from round 1. So here's Yevon versus Vialva. In each of these examples, the player who is our hero will be the player on the right with the blue cards, and we'll be talking from Vialva's perspective. I do want to say the people who lost these games, these are, to win some of the better games, you have to face some of the better moves. And so all these games are against people who defended very reasonably. One thing I'll get into later about this set is I think advantages just often prove decisive. There were very few situations where someone had a good position and then it led to a tie. It just very reliably, someone has a good position, they win the game. And they often win the game with relatively minimal resistance. And again, we'll get into that in a bit, but it meant these games where higher resistance was faced are going to be, to me, more interesting games, and it is to say the people who lost these games, I think, played interesting moves. So Villalva finds a really lovely sequence here. I think the obvious move to play is 8-6-4-7 in 3 immediately. But I think it's not so great. I think, for instance, 2-7, 8-7, and 2, grabbing safety, capturing the card in 1, is good enough for a pretty comfortable tie. Even with the relatively low-level cards remaining, they're pretty good for the directionality of the remaining game. There's that safe card in 2. There's that safe card in 9. Yevon's in good shape. He's going to tie that game every time. And, you know, Villalva can't really push. So we saw, I want to do 8-6-4-7, but I think I can get that 2-7, 8-7 out of your hand. So we played the really nice move 4-6-7-5 in 5. Just creating that threat in 8, right? Because now 8-6-4-7 is a huge threat in 8. Yevon blocks 8 safely with 2-7, 8-7. But this safety is not as good as the other safety was, and now Yevon hits with 8-6-4-7 and 3, and it's actually winning. And so I really liked the delaying 3 to draw a certain card out of their hand, and then knowing there would be safety in 3 thereafter. I thought this was a really nice sequence, and after Villalva does go in 3, 3 moves from now, Villalva is winning, and just really nice sequence. And I think 5 is sort of an underrated move to look for in these setups, but if there's that safe card in 9, sometimes 5 forces the queue, and sometimes when it forces the queue, you have a safe recapture in either 3 or 7 and a really good situation. And if you can see that in advance, you can play these really nice variations. Our second game, Aesola's our hero versus Lolek. I think Aesola played kind of the most just cleanly shows exactly what you want to do on this rule set game of the round. I think just really excellent played game. Used a low-level starter, the 1-5-7-4, but it was already a difficult card to deal with, right? The 9-8-6-4 in Lolek's hand could only take it one way. The 6-5-6-7, the next most powerful card, could only take it one way. None of the other cards could take it at all. So we can see how this 5-7 corner was already something just posing really big problems to an opponent's hand. Lolek played in the distance, trying to direct the game with 7-1-5-3, with the point that 9-8-6-4 is a good recapture of it that is likely safe in either 7 or 9. And Aesola just immediately used their lowest level card, something easy to recapture, something that didn't set up Lolek's hand in any way in 5, and kept all the powerful cards for the endgame. Again, really cleanly good play. Lolek took the only safety that was available. There was no other safe move than 9-8-6-4. And here, Aesola finds the win. There's only one forced win here. Not the most difficult move to find, but a lot of times great games aren't these really difficult moves to find. They're just every move being just exactly right, just using the right card in the right square. And here, 7-4-2-7 and 2 is the right card for the right square, leaving 2 fantastic sweepers for the endgame that absolutely dominate. It's the only winning move. Love how Aesola played this. I think this is just a model game for how to play this rule set. And for good hand building too. This was one of the hands that inspired mine. You may notice 8-1-9-9, 7-8-6-4, 1-5-7-4. Those cards were all in my build as well. All right. Our third game is Slash vs. Metis. This was, I think, the most kind of hyped game of the round, for here's 2 really elite players going at it. Sorry, my voice really is dead. I thought Metis' hand was great, and it's the one that mainly inspired mine. And here he took advantage of Slash's left weakness. Slash only has the 7-6-4-8 going left, and played 4-7-8-5 and 4. And this just wins the endgame. And the point is 8-1-9-9 is going to dominate those squares 6 and 9. And so if Slash plays 7-6-4-8 and 2, Metis plays 6-6-3-2 and 8, and 8-1-9-9 dominates the remaining squares. If Slash plays 7, 6, 4, 8, and 8, Metis plays 6, 6, 3, 2, and 2, and 8, 1, 9, 9 dominates the remaining squares. And either way, that paired square thinking is just going to solve the position, and Slash really has to play in 2 or 8, where he's so far behind. Really nice win by Metis. Our final game of the round is Turds vs. Fish. Our final game that I want to showcase, I mean. Fish, I think, did a nice job showing here that just 8-8 corners are really strong. Turds starts with a weak corner in 1 with the 2-2-3-3, and Fish goes to an 8-8 corner in the far corner that is already somewhat difficult for Turds' hand to deal with. I generally don't like using the high levels early, but on second turn you have a little more freedom to do so, and this was one that clearly played well versus Turds' hand. Turds went in 7, Fish went in 8, and then Turds went in 6. Now, what happened here was Turds just completely missed that 6-2-4-1 had the plus wall combo in 3. So what happened here was not some like horrible not some like horrible misunderstanding. It was just you're sometimes blind to things. I've had 3 or so blindnesses since my return where I just hung a 1 mover with nothing, just not seeing it at all. And this is what happened to Turds here. 8, 1, 9, 9, and 4 was a better move. There were ways to save this position. But I do think, even aside that blindness, the finish is fun and interesting. And I don't really want to criticize Turds' play here, because if this wasn't comboed, this move would be fine. So under the kind of priors of thinking he had, not seeing that there was the combo, this was a fine move. I do think Turds' hand is actually worthy of some criticism, though. And that's where I want to go at him hard. 5-4-3-6 and 6-7-4-5, they do have 2 gaps, but usually touching numbers are more relevant, and it's a whole lot of 1 gaps, and I just don't think there's that many 9s going around. And I think if the opponent does have an 8-1-9-9 in their hand, they're likely to hold it for the 8 game. If they use it early, I think that's probably a mistake, whether we cover it well or not. And if they hold it for the late game, hopefully we're not holding on to these cards to cover it at the end, and they each only cover it one way. I don't want to be stuck with my low levels, so I want them to do useful things. And I think the useful things they'll be doing is not fighting 9s early. I think it's going to be fighting 6s, 7s, maybe 8s early, not 9s. So if we look at Turds' hand, 2-2-3-3, 5-4-3-6, 6-7-4-5, this is very aimed at covering 9s and 10s, and I think that is the wrong way to play this, and I think that gave Turds a smaller margin of error if he did have a blindness. Not because I think that hand's innately losing, but I think this was the wrong targets. I think this was the wrong way to go, and that doesn't mean he was necessarily going to lose. A lot of people played ways with hands that I don't believe in and did very well. But this was one hand that struck me as misreading the rule set. Anyways, to get to the actual calculation of the game, 6-2-4-1 in 3 combos, but doesn't actually win. After 5-4-3-6 and 2, 6-7-4-5 controls everything left in Fish's hand, which is kind of neat. The point being that 7-7-4-2 and 5 is now plussed by 6-7-4-5. Either of the cards remaining in Fish's hand have a 7 to the right, so if they go in 4, it is also plussed by 6-7-4-5 using Titan and 8. The only move that isn't comboed by it is 1-7-5-4, and that's the only move that doesn't capture or lock in much. And so Turds only needs the overpower at the end to tie there. So actually 6-2-4-1 and 3 is not winning. And so Turds had a chance to save this game even though he didn't see the combo, except that Fish did find the winning move. I have a threat here, it doesn't work, I can set up a threat somewhere else. And so he plays the excellent 1-7-5-4 and 2, the only win, setting up 6-2-4-1 to have combos in both 3 and 5, and that was enough to win. Now, as happens, Turds played his next move still thinking the game was fine and under control, and in fact winning, because he didn't see that 6-2-4-1 had the combo in 3, and then the combo in 3 hit, and suddenly the game's over, and it's sort of this weird shock when all the cards flip and you don't understand how it happened, and that must have felt really crappy. But I think Fish played really nicely, and I think blindnesses happen, that's fine. I do think the hand was a mistake, though. So some stats on the round. Those were my favorite 4 games of the round, or I thought the most interesting 4. I think Vialva's was a really cool sequence of moves. I think Midas's was a very powerful hand, well executed. I think Aesala was a very powerful hand, really well executed. Really exactly what you want to do on the rule set. And I think Fish found a nice tactical win. So some stats. Do you want first turn or second turn? Well, unless the stats change today with games on the final day, first and second turn won an equal number of games. If you adjust for strength of player, I think the better players slightly more often had first turn. So maybe you can conclude second turn had a slight advantage given that it ran even with maybe a slightly weaker players, but it's nothing much. If we adjust for late game mistakes, like ones that okay, that shouldn't have happened, this game should have had a different result. Second turn did throw away more points than first, which again suggests second turn could have scored more. So I think overall, the kind of evidence we have, just counting, it is small samples, but the evidence we have is that second turn may have had somewhat of an advantage, right? Even score, but there were a couple things going against second turn. I don't believe it. I think last turn should be so powerful on this set that first turn should be favored, and I bet with bigger samples, first turn opens up a lead. But given that both turns ran about even with, circumstantial stuff favoring second turn being better than that looks, this is probably a pretty balanced set. I'd still bet on first turn in the long run, especially as we reach the top end of player quality. I was certainly hoping, if my game was played, to get first turn and not looking forward to defending second turn. But I may be just wrong. To use an A or not to A. So same wall was off. It seems like A's should be weaker. But that also could mean A's are targeted less. And A's are difficult to target, because the cards that do it most are the low-level cards, and those are likely out of your hand early or unpleasant to hold on to. So they weren't chosen often. Only 6 of, around 18 matchups were played. So only about a third of those matchups even included a card with an A, and, that would just be one of the 2. But 4 of them won their matchups. So I actually think A's scored pretty decently, especially given that a number of the people who used A's were the betting underdogs, and they scored really well. Again, small samples, but it does look like A's were totally fine to use. On the other end of the spectrum, 9-8s, including 9-8-8s, performed really poorly. 9-9s scored well, but 9-8s did badly, scoring 2 out of 7. Do these tiny samples mean much? No, but if they support what you wanted to believe, definitely pretend they mean a lot. So I think my verdict here is A's would not be what I'd choose here, but I think they were fine to use, and I think they actually scored really well. And so I certainly would not criticize anyone who chose to use a card with an A here. Popular cards. 8199, clear most popular level 9 card. It was used 11 times. 8829 trailed at 6 uses, but as we saw, these 9-8 types did not score well. Not sure why that was. That seems like a small sample effect. At level 7, I think the main debate is, do you want to use something dynamic like an 8764, an 8754? Some people went 8772s, but I think those are a bit less dynamic, and I'll ignore those in this comparison. But 8764s and 8754s are pretty similar versus an 8-8 corner. And the more dynamic cards were used a lot more often, 16 times versus 7, and I was intending to use those cards. But I really think the 8-8 corners played well. They scored 6 out of 7. We saw Fish using one to really good effect. I think when they were used, they were really good. I think the levels did not offer naturally cards that had particularly good coverage of 8-8 corners, right? 8199 is not that amazing at dealing with 8-8 corners. What else is there? An A8 is actually not that great at dealing with 8-8 corners. It only has the 1 capture. And that's if it's facing it. It is less otherwise. An 8-8-9 is only going to be able to overpower it one way if the 9 happens to face against it. So 8-8 corner is pretty difficult for high levels to take. And if we think about lower levels, an 8-7-6-4 covers it one way if the 6-4 or the 6-8 lines up, but often it won't. The level 5s are often going to be 6-7-6-3s, which don't cover it at all, or 7-7 corners, which could have 2-4 in the back, but basically don't cover it at all either. So I think 8-8 corners were just pretty likely to be safe, and were just tough and good cards to use. And I went with an 8-7-6-4 hand, but I have absolutely think going with an 8-8 corner is just as good. Generally speaking, corner cards were used more than horizontals and verticals, but actual performance was pretty similar. I think it's fine to play all corners and pretty bad to play all horizontal or vertical cards, but players who used 1 or 2 horizontals or verticals performed fine, and it's definitely a viable way to go. I think, generally speaking, you wanted those cards to be more dynamic, though, right? Like, while I think an 8-7-5-4 versus an 8-8 corner, both are good choices, and the 8-8 corner might even be better there, I think something like an 8-3-8-3 is a lot worse than an 8-5-7-4. I think if you were going to use these horizontals, verticals, they had to be dynamic cards that had tools in different directions and plus wall possibilities and all that. Do you want to use your level 9 first, and when do you want to use it? So I just counted through the games who did players use their level 9 first or second. And actually, this means I forgot to, in the first second turn count, forgot to add in Delial's game at the end. He did win with first turn, so first turn actually put up a tiny plus. But again, as I say here, if there's 17 decisive games and the score is 9-8, that is as close to 50% as you can get. You know, it can't come out 8.5, 8.5, 9-8, 8-9. Those are the closest you can get. It's not really a strong indicator. So players who used their level 9 before the opponent did went 9-8. So a slight plus for using your level 9 before they did. However, when they used their level 9 on turn 3 or earlier, they lost every time. 0-3 for players that used their level 9 first and used it on the first 3 moves. If you used it first and used it move 5 or later, you scored 7-2, which really to me suggests you do not want to be using your level 9 early, but once you hit the mid-game, kind of turn 5, often its power there could be a way to use it really effectively at that point, but not really before then. It scored okay when used on move 4. Saving level 9 until the final turn was quite effective for both first and second turn players, and did fine kind of whether or not the opponent had used theirs earlier. As established, you can use it in the middle game, you can definitely hold it for the end game, but the opening is not the time to be using your highest level card. The same effect sort of exists, but not nearly as strongly with level 7s. You should feel freer to expend them early. And overall, I think you want your best card until at least the mid-game. You probably want your level 7 as well in the mid-game, but you could use it earlier. The level 5 can feel pretty free to use it early. What else do we got? How did predictions do? So in betting matchups that were played, the betting favorite won 12 of 18. I think. Again, I may have counted poorly somewhere because I keep saying 9-8 first turn, and that adds up to 17 decisive results, not 18. So I probably missed something, but that's okay. It's all close enough. Weirdly, and this is admittedly small samples, but close matchups, ones where 60 or 70% predicted someone to advance scored 66.7%, while ones where people predicted someone 80 to 100% to advance also scored 66.7%. Again, these are tiny samples, but it does seem like while overall the betting favorites tended to win, it was only 2/3. It wasn't like, they won 80 or 90% of the matchups, and the more people that predicted someone over the opponent didn't seem to really correlate with the odds of them actually winning. Though again, this is tiny samples. And a good reminder that tournaments just have lots of upsets. A good tournament player, if you score 50% over time in tournaments, you are a good tournament player. Because the way tournaments are formatted, the first round, on average, you will face a 50%-ish opponent. But in the second round, half the field, and it's usually going to be most of the people in the weaker half, are eliminated. So the second round average opposition is much higher. And the third round opposition is much higher than that. So only in round 1 are you actually facing a kind of balanced field. And after that, you are facing a very strong field. And so if you score 50%, you're doing that 50% somewhat in the first round, but somewhat in the second, third, fourth rounds. And that's just really hard to maintain. A 50% player in tournaments, if they played an actual round robin versus the field, would be expected to score well over 50% because of how it works. So 50%, really strong showing. Great tournament players, think people like Kazik. Turds is around here. Cookie is around here. You know, a lot of great players are around 60%. Maybe some of those are a little above, some are a little below, but all are scoring in the vicinity of 60%. These are great players. Anyone who's scoring 60% over a decent sample is in my top 40 players of all time, and often, you know, in the top 25, in the top 15. 70% over time is basically, if you did that for any sample at all, you're in my top 12 or so of all time. And 80% puts you very firmly in the GOAT conversation. And no one over a large sample is higher than 80%. Which is to say, they lose 20% of the time. That happens all the time. Now, most of that 20% is against other greats, but still, upsets are happening all the time, even for the very, very best. So each big upset's a surprise, but in general, we should expect a whole bunch to occur. A whole bunch did, and we're now entering the second round. I think the most interesting thing to happen was the tie rate, because most of the games I looked at, I picked 4 that I thought were good and interesting and did have this clever way to win, but most of the games I looked at, once someone was winning, they had tons of different ways to win, and could have done it lots of different ways, which suggests to me this is a set where when an advantage was gotten, it was often just huge, right? It wasn't just that you were lost to perfect play, it was that you were lost to lots of different play. It was very easy to find wins once someone was winning, which made it harder for me to find really nice moments because there weren't many where I could be like, ah, yes, here is the clear way to a win, when in fact there were many clear ways to a win. This could have been a round 1 effect because round 1 is going to have the most unbalanced matchups, but I actually don't think that's what it was. Because what this ended up leading to was there were very few ties. So I could be missing some games, but I had 18 wins to 3 ties, which is just a huge rate of wins to ties. So I think it was a rule set where just advantages were so tough to defend against. And it's actually higher than 85%. 85% was when it was 17-3, but there was another win, so 18-3, and I didn't adjust the percentage here. But this is just an absurdly high decisive rate. And so I think this was very much a rule set where, because of the vast difference in quality of cards, when someone got in trouble, it was very hard to get out of trouble, because usually getting into trouble meant having way worse cards left for the resulting position, and that's just so hard to get out of. And so saves in difficult positions basically just didn't happen. They weren't found if they were there. And I also think it's possible this led to more upsets than usual, because maybe in a normal matchup, you know, a weaker player gets an advantage and the better player finds a way to calm the position and get to a tie and goes on to win in a later game. And here, it was very difficult to save those positions that went badly. And so this may have been an upset-prone rule set. It may not have. I think it was a good rule set. I liked it. I like rule sets that end up not having a turn advantage. I like rule sets where there's a lot of different directions to go, and it was pretty clear looking at the hands. People did go different directions, where my instinct that A's were bad turned out, I think, not to be right. So I thought it was a really interesting, good rule set. And I like rule sets where not too many rules are missing, and same wall as a rule that could be missed here and have an interesting impact without changing the flow of most games. So really liked everything about the rule set, I think. But it also had this curious effect where ties were basically non-existent. And that's all I got for you on Nephilim Round 1. Congrats to everyone who advanced. Good luck to everyone in future rounds. I'm really excited to see what happens. The new rule set should be going up shortly, and I'll try to post a video like this for every round, not going through every game that happens, though maybe in the later rounds I will, but focusing on some interesting ones, trying to talk through maybe what was the right strategy for the set. Really curious if anyone disagrees with me on what the right strategies were, if they think, you missed this key way to play, because that could very easily be the case. And I didn't actually get to play the set, though I did get to see my hand in action when Delial played it very effectively. He played a really good game, and I was thinking of covering it here as a 5th game, but I decided actually to use it for a different video. that will use it, among many other games, to talk about how calculation in structures works and pairing of squares. So anyways, have a good day, and Nephilim, so glad to see Majors back in action. So excited for this. It's great to see.